All right, it's 1:05. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Kelly Willits, and I'm the Director of Professional Development at Mid-America Arts Alliance. And I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our Managing Workplace Conflict with Karen L. Jones. Just a few housekeeping notes. Please remember to keep your microphones muted until prompted by the hosts. For questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and they will be addressed at the end of each section. We will have links to websites, mailing lists, and newsletters in our chat. For English captions, simply click the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. However, for Spanish captions or to adjust the size and contrast, please see the bit.ly link in the chat. And I'd like to thank Marabi and Total Captions for their services today. Now, a bit about Mid-America Arts Alliance and Engage. Mid-America Arts Alliance strengthens and supports artists, cultural organizations, and communities throughout the region and beyond. We are a nonprofit regional arts, oh my goodness. We are a nonprofit regional arts organization representing Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas, and focuses on strengthening communities and improving lives through extraordinary cultural experiences. Mid-America Arts Alliance's Engage program provides community-centered professional and organizational development that focuses on leadership training for small to mid-sized arts and cultural organizations, using a combination of workshops, coach consultations, and peer-to-peer learning opportunities. Engage works with participants to govern more effectively, become more fiscally astute, and develop strategies to address community needs. In our continued effort to share these strategies and address community needs, we've invited Karen L. Jones from Mission to Transition to present today's workshop. Karen combines coaching and caring with professional services, creating a safe space to explore ideas, options, implement solutions, and address the changes that keep you from achieving your goals. Since starting Mission Transition, Karen has focused on helping clients achieve their goals. She uses her education in law, international business, communications, and sociology, as well as her extensive experience working with global corporations, academia, organizations, and small businesses to meet these goals. She is a certified mediator and certified yoga breathing coach, and she uses exceptional coaching and consultating skills combined with passion and creativity to bring value to her clients. So without any further hesitation, please join me in welcoming Karen Jones. Welcome, Karen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Dr. Willits, for the very kind introduction and for the invitation. Thank you to Mid-America Arts Alliance for having me to talk with you all about this very important topic and something that a lot of people struggle with, which is managing conflict in the workplace. So again, my name is Karen Jones, the owner of Mission to Transition, LLC. And Kelly has told you a bit about my background, my law degree, degree in international business and trade law, sociology, my being a certified mediator and yoga breathing coach. And I mention these things to you again, just because they will have relevancy as we get into this workshop, each aspect of that. I also want to just give you a little bit more information about some of these spaces that I have been involved in. I've done, I was in corporate, doing corporate work for almost 2 decades, doing negotiations, contracts, compliance work, risk management, procurement, managing operational teams, and managing project teams. I have developed training programs, facilitated trainings, conducted training for business areas, teams, and organizations in many parts of the world, including North America, Central America, South America, Europe, and Asia. Excuse me. I have also worked in academia for more than 2 decades. I have taught conflict management, employment law, contracts, negotiation, change management, ethics, professionalism, and a whole lot of other courses, both in the US and in Europe. With my business Mission to Transition, I have worked with businesses, organizations, individuals, helping them with policies, processes, business development, personnel training, leadership development, employment related issues, and other areas. So again, I mention all of this, about my background and experience only to provide you with a backdrop, and to make even more pungent the notion that every place that I have worked, every place that I have lived, every place that I've traveled, there has been conflict. Okay, and right off the bat, I don't want you to think that I brought the conflict, but I'm just saying that that conflict is inevitable. So first, again, I just want to make clear the point that conflict in its purest sense is natural. It's really a natural part of life. And so all of you were very wise to sign up for this workshop. And it tells me that you're kind of in that space of recognizing the existence of conflict and really wanting to find solutions for addressing it. And that's particularly the case when you're talking about the work environment, because when you're talking about the work environment, it's an environment where different people from different places, coming from a whole lot of different circumstances, different approaches, different perspectives, different personalities, they're all coming into a place or engaging with one another, interacting with one another. And in that type of situation, conflict is inevitable. But that does not mean that conflict is always bad, okay? And it also does not mean that conflict cannot be managed. And let me put it in the affirmative. Conflict can be good and conflict can be managed. Okay, so then with that being said, let's jump into more, just let me give you an idea of what we're going to cover in this workshop today. And I am going to start sharing my slides. Can you see my slides? Can someone give me a thumbs up?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Sorry. Oh, yes.
Thank you. And I'm just going to, okay. So the objectives of this workshop. So by the end of this workshop, you will have a better understanding of workplace conflict, kind of what it is, what it looks like, how it presents itself. You will be more familiar with the causes and impacts of workplace conflict. You will also be able to identify different conflict styles. And a bit of a spoiler alert, you're going to get familiar with your own conflict style as well. And also you will have more confidence in managing and resolving conflict. And most importantly, you will have tools to help you effectively deal with conflict. Okay, now, oops, it's not, okay, there we go. So, but at the end of this workshop, you will still experience conflict in the workplace, okay? So I don't want you to think that by attending this workshop, that suddenly conflict is going to disappear. It's not. It's going to be there, and it is something that you're going to have to deal with. But through the information and techniques and exercises that we do in this workshop, I am very confident that we can help to minimize the impact and reduce the likelihood of you experiencing harmful conflict in the workplace. Okay, so before we get into the more of the content of this workshop, what's really important when dealing with conflict in general, and certainly as we go into this workshop, I really want us to establish what I refer to as a safe space. Okay, and a safe space is just a place where everyone can feel comfortable communicating, engaging, and even more importantly, being focused on what we're doing here in this workshop. So in order to establish that safe space, I want to take you through a yoga breathing exercise. Don't get too frightened. You're not going to have to twist or contort yourselves. Okay, it's just a breathing exercise. It is a yoga breathing exercise in the category of water breathing. And the category of water breathing in the portfolio, if you will, of breathing categories, water breathing is a type of breathing that helps to center you. It's really a good type of breathing practice that you can use to calm yourself, to focus yourself. It's a really good one to do when you're feeling anxious, or and so even though we're using it now as we go into this workshop, it's also a really good one for you to think of when you confront conflict. You know, when you're seeing conflict around you, then stepping aside and using this breathing technique to help to kind of focus you and settle you. Okay, so with this breathing, exercise, what I'm going to ask you to do first of all, is to sit up in your chair, okay, and with your back away from the back of your chair. Okay, so your back should not be rested against the back. You should be sitting up straight but relaxed. Okay, so don't sit like a soldier, you know, real stiff. Sit more relaxed. Okay, your legs should be about hip width apart and flat on the floor in front of you. You can place your hands, I'll talk about your hands in a moment, but you should, with this practice, you should breathe through your nose, breathe in and out through your nose. And right now, just breathe normally. And what I'm going to also ask you to do is place your right hand on your stomach, okay? And what I want you to do as you breathe normally, you should be breathing from your stomach area. What you're really doing is breathing from your diaphragm. And your diaphragm should be slightly inflating, so your hand should be moving out when you're inhaling, and it should be deflating, or your hand should be moving towards your body when you're exhaling. Okay, so just breathing normally, just feeling that in and out, slight in and out motion, not pushing it at all. Now, what I want us to do is in an 8 count, I want us to do 4 rounds of in and out. So 4 rounds of inhale on an 8 count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then exhale on an 8 count, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So 4 rounds of that. And I will do the counting, and you should be breathing based on my counting. Okay? So let's begin. And also, please feel free to close your eyes. Closing your eyes also helps you to focus as well. Okay, so let's begin. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Exhale, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And breathe normally. Okay. So hopefully that has helped you feel a bit more focused, a bit more centered, so that we're all in the same space at the same time and leaving anything outside of this space outside of this space. Okay? So, and again, this is a really good exercise for you to do, for you to practice whenever you're feeling a little anxious or experiencing any type of anxiety. In addition to the breathing and the focusing, I would also like to get our mutual agreement with regards to this safe space. I really want all of us to treat this as a safe space. We will be doing exercises. You guys will be in breakout sessions. And in those breakout sessions, I want you to feel free to discuss and really share information. And so I want you to treat the general space, but then also the breakout sessions as a safe space. I will encourage you all to be respectful of each other, respect each other's privacy, and hold our discussions confidential. Okay, and that's mostly what the discussions are really going to mostly take place in the breakout sessions, but also some in this larger session as well. Okay, and if you guys agree with that, I'm going to ask you to type yes in the chat. If you disagree, I will also ask you to type no in the chat. Okay, so hopefully we will see a bunch of yeses. Okay, so far I'm seeing all yeses. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm seeing all yeses. Great. I do not see any no's. If there are any no's, please make yourselves known at this time. Okay, and I'm going to then assume that it is safe to proceed. Thank you all very much. So now that I'm going to take off my yoga breathing hat and I'm going to put on my sociologist hat. So there have been, of course, many studies about conflict, and specifically around conflict in the workplace. And there's a couple of statistics that I think are very important, again, to set the stage for what we're about to do here. So the first one is that 85% of employees in the United States experience workplace conflict. So that is saying the vast majority of people in the workplace in the United States experience conflict. Another interesting and very important statistic is that on average, approximately 2.8 hours per week is spent dealing with some sort of conflict. And we'll get more into what conflict is, but when you think about it, when you think about misunderstandings in email, communication, disagreements between different business areas, then you start calculating all of that, and you'll realize, wow, that really is eating up a significant amount of time. So I just wanted to share that information with you. So next, I want to talk a little bit about the survey that was sent to you when you registered. Thank you for your responses. And with regards to the results of the survey, the results of the survey are very much in line with the statistics that I just mentioned, with the 85% of employees experiencing conflict, because you guys out of 32 responses to the pre-workshop survey, the first question, have you ever experienced unhealthy workplace conflict? 26 of you said yes, 6 of you said no. Okay, again, out of 32 responses. So 26 said yes, 6 said no. And that's right on par, around that 85%. For the second question, have you ever been personally involved in workplace conflict? Again, 25 said yes, 7 said no. And then for the final question, or for the third question, have you ever attempted to resolve workplace conflict amongst colleagues? 27 of you said yes, 5 said no. Again, all 3 responses really around that 85%. So again, it just shows that this really is something that is very going to be very beneficial to all of you, because even if you're in that small minority of people that have not experienced workplace conflict, have not been involved in it, or have not dealt with it, one thing that is absolutely for sure, either you are currently dealing with workplace conflict, or you have just recently in some way dealt with workplace conflict, or at some point in the very near future, you will have a situation of having to deal with some sort of workplace conflict. So, so the survey results are definitely on par. With regards to survey question number 4, we will address that one a little bit later in this workshop. So now let's really get into what is conflict. So there are, of course, several definitions of conflict, of what conflict is. So conflict is a serious disagreement or argument. Now, it's typically a protracted one, a drawn out one. It can be, as a verb, it can, conflict is to be incompatible or at variance with, to clash. Another definition, competitive or opposing action of incompatibles, is antagonistic. It's an antagonistic state or action when it's involving divergent ideas, interests, or persons. Another definition, an active disagreement between people with opposing opinions or principles. And as you can see from the definitions, these can contribute to things like toxic disagreement. It can lead to not being productive or create ongoing discord. So all three of these definitions really do present a good representation of what conflict is. Now, I mentioned earlier that conflict can be good or it can be bad. So conflict can be beneficial. When you look at good conflict, conflict can be healthy from the standpoint of presenting different perspectives, new ideas. Some degree of conflict tends to contribute to creativity and productivity in some senses. But conflict tends to turn harmful when it is non-productive, when it becomes detrimental, not only to the individual, but also it may be detrimental to the environment or detrimental to the organization, or when it causes disruption. It causes disruption to processes, to normal operations. Okay? And it's also important to remember that every disagreement is not necessarily conflict. Okay, so disagreement in and of itself is not necessarily conflict. It's just when that disagreement turns towards the more harmful aspects of conflict. And some of the negative responses to conflict, the ones that we tend to see from individuals, when you're seeing conflict in an environment, in a work environment even, you will see individuals that start to retreat, the ones that don't want to engage. You will also see defensiveness or hostility arise. You will see coping mechanisms come out. Different people have different ways of coping. And it might be that they start displaying a shortness in their responses, or getting kind of snappy. Also, poor performance is another indicator of or another response to conflict. A lot of times when people are dealing with conflict, it's hard for them to manage it. And so their performance tends to suffer. And then a changed mood is another way that an individual might display or response to conflict. Maybe they're typically more happy-go-lucky, but then suddenly their mood starts getting a little darker, or they're not, saying good morning the way they used to, or, you just see this change in mood. Some of the organizational responses to conflict is that some organizations ignore conflict. And a lot of times, ignoring of conflict is because an organization either doesn't have the time or the capacity to deal with the conflict. So they either consciously or unconsciously ignore the fact that conflict is going on. Sometimes an organization will also feel that oh, well, I'm not going to intervene in that, it'll resolve itself. That's another way that I've seen organizations ignore conflict. Another way that an organization responds to conflict is through bad performance reviews. And sometimes they use that process to give a bad review, not addressing the actual core issue of the conflict. Layoffs can also be a response to conflict. Reduced reward, meaning, someone suddenly doesn't get a bonus, maybe because it's perceived that this conflict is occurring within the organization. So it's almost like a penalty, if you will. And then a change in management is sometimes a response to conflict, as well as a change in leadership. Again, the organizational side of things, as well as the individual side, the responses to conflict tend not to address the actual issue of the conflict. Okay, so those are some of the negative responses to conflict. Now, some of the common causes of conflict include things like personality clashes. People just have different types of personalities, and some just don't mesh very well. Departmental disagreements or rivalries with departments within an organization. A lot of times, the function of one area is dependent to some degree on the function of another. And so anytime there's a disagreement or there's a rivalry, then that's going to cause conflict. Management issues or lack of proper management, that is an area that tends to cause a lot of conflict. Organizational disruption or change. People tend to, in general, just be resistant to change. And so that change within an organization can cause conflict. External challenges, family issues, health issues, politics, the pandemic, all of these external challenges that people are dealing with outside of the work environment impact on conflict within the work environment. Okay, lack of understanding or misunderstandings, a huge part of conflict or common cause of conflict. And that can be misunderstandings in verbal communication, written communication, text, email, body language, all of that comes into play. As well as authority issues. Sometimes, just like you can have personality clashes with your peer group, you can also have personality clashes with management. Just maybe communication issues that way as well. A lack of cooperation, someone feeling as though someone doesn't want to help out in a particular area where they should. And differences in methods or styles is another common cause of conflict. Lower bat performance can also contribute to conflict. Differences in values or goals. Again, we all come into a workplace with our own set of values. The organization has a core set of values, and sometimes those individual values clash with one another. Or I've also seen it where the organizational values clash with someone's individual core values and creates conflict. And then sometimes conflict just comes down to the fact that somebody just came into the workplace in a bad mood. And that's just, and that causes conflict. So these are a lot of the common causes of conflict. And again, 6 of the most common causes in the workplace include what I mentioned, that resistance to change, unclear job expectations, poor communication, toxic work environment, differences in personality or values, and poor work habits. Those tend to be 6 of the common, most common conflicts in the workplace. Oops. So I have a question for you all. So we just talked, I just went over some of the sources and causes of conflict in the workplace. And so I'm interested to know what are some of the sources and causes of conflict in the workplace that you all have experienced? So if you wouldn't mind just typing in the chat, what are some of the sources and causes of conflict that you have experienced? Differences in personalities and values, absolutely. Strong personality clashes, yes. Unclear job expectations, different personality, yes. Bullying, challenges to authority, communication style, lack of cooperation, unhealthy work environment, external reasons, yes, absolutely. Reduced reward, yep, all of them, yes. So it seems like you guys are pretty much covering what I just spoke about as being in a lot of the yes values misalignments, and yeah, all of that. Very good. So yes, so that's why then we are going to, let's see. I'm sorry, let me close that. Okay. So, so let's then move into addressing workplace conflict. So I'm sure that you all have in your dealings in organizations have had to address workplace conflict based on the responses that you've given. And I do want to just kind of set again further set the stage for why it's so important that you all are on this doing this workshop. Human resources used to be seen as that place that you go to resolve employee disputes. Okay, so when conflict arose in the workplace, and I've been in the workplace long enough to remember this. I early in my corporate career, I always had a very close working relationship with human resources. Not because there was conflict, but certainly in situations where there was conflict. So there was a very close working relationship with human resources. So I was always very much in charge of the business area, working in whatever capacity I was working at that time, whether it was procurement or contracts or risk management, whatever it was. And so it was always kind of, you work in tandem with human resources. They dealt with the human relations types of issues. And from a management standpoint, yes, you dealt with some of those, but human resources got involved if there was like an employee dispute, or certainly an employee and management dispute. Legal was also part of that equation, but legal was always reserved for more serious disputes or litigation involving the mistreatment of others. And I worked very closely with legal and was very involved with the legal aspect of things as well, because in my negotiation of contracts, dealing with those types of relationships, then I was working in a legal capacity with our legal team. But from an employee standpoint, our legal department that dealt with employee issues would only get involved if there was potential litigation involving that employee, or there was some serious mistreatment like harassment that rose to the level of harassment. And so all of that has really shifted. Human resources, so some organizations don't have a human resources area at all. And some organizations that have a human resources area, they only deal with certain aspects of human resources, not so much on the side of employee disputes. And so really now we're at an age where managers, frontline managers, managers, directors, supervisors are the ones that are really expected to address disputes between employees or within their business area. So again, that's why it's really good that you guys are participating in this workshop so that you can gain some of those skills. So even though managers are expected to handle these employee types of conflict or mild disputes, many managers lack confidence in dealing with conflict. They do not know how to properly approach a conflict situation, and they're not sure when the line is crossed and HR or legal should be brought in, or they do not want to be seen as the bad guy or disliked by their direct reports, or they simply lack the skills necessary to be effective conflict managers. Okay, so then the purpose again of this workshop is to help develop some of those skills that you will need as conflict managers. And I'm going to, before going any further, I also want to give a disclaimer that it is absolutely impossible to cover the full gamut of conflict management in an hour-and-a-half workshop, and now in the remaining 45 minutes. But what I do want to do is provide you with some skills, just a few skills that will help you in conflict management. There are a lot more skills that can be utilized. And I looked at skills from the areas of conflict management, mediation, negotiation, other alternative dispute resolutions, and then some of the behavioral related skills associated with in the area of social psychology as well. And so the skills that I want to go over with you today, there are three. One is how to identify conflict, and we've touched on some of that. Intervening in conflict, and these are the specific techniques that we'll talk about: de-escalation, active listening, and neutrality. And then we will go over conflict styles. Okay, so those three ways of intervening in conflict are the three techniques that we will focus on. So first, just a little bit more on identifying conflict. So in the workplace, if you are witnessing conflict, you're usually witnessing it, conflict amongst peers, management, leadership, looking at infighting amongst the board of directors or others. If it's personal to you, you are involved directly in the conflict with a peer or with your manager or with a board member or others. And there's also kind of a third category or a subcategory that is important to at least recognize, and that's management. Because from a management perspective, you're often witnessing conflict amongst your direct reports or between your direct reports and another business area. So it's just important to understand these differences, because there's a different dynamic that's involved when you're addressing and dealing with conflict in these different ways. So identifying conflict. Usually aggressive behavior is going to be one indication of conflict, that there's some sort of conflict. Someone's argumentative, passive aggressive, condescending or belligerent. Also looking at body language or demeanor. Someone is very closed off or non-responsive. They're retreating, as I mentioned earlier. They're not engaging, or they're just avoiding interactions. Those are all indications or identifiers of conflict. So looking at these intervening skills, these mediation, negotiation types of skills, de-escalation, active listening, and neutrality. So de-escalation. De-escalation simply means to reduce the intensity of a conflict. Okay, and that technique is usually demonstrated first and foremost by whoever's trying to de-escalate it, whether you're involved in the conflict or you're intervening to help others in a conflict situation. The most important thing for you is to stay calm. Okay, and it's also often important to take a pause. Okay, try not to get into the rhythm of the dispute, because once you do that, then it's really hard to de-escalate. It's really best to, again, stay calm and then kind of take a pause and take a deep breath, just to, again, go into that intervening mode in a with a different with a calmer energy. And then maintain a low, deep tone. And what that means is, I think you all can relate that typically if someone's getting really heated or excited, or, their voice starts raising, their voice starts going up. So you don't want to add to that intensity when you're trying to de-escalate. So you really want to keep a low, deep tone. And don't get defensive. That is probably the hardest part of all of it, I think, for all of us, is really staying just outside of the conflict itself, and not getting defensive if someone starts turning some of the argumentativeness or challenges against you. So just really trying your best not to get defensive, and really focus on asking relevant questions. Questions that are going to get at the core of the disagreement, dispute, or conflict, without really targeting the personalities of the individuals. Okay? So those are some of the techniques to use relative to de-escalation. So now let's talk about active listening. Now, active listening is engaged listening. It's listening with the intent of understanding. A lot of times when we say that we're actively listening, what we're really doing is listening for someone to break in their conversation so we can jump in and say what we want to say. So really what we're doing is we're not really listening. We're just waiting for an opportunity to say what we want to say. Active listening is just the opposite of that. We are engaged in the individual, in what they're saying, and we're engaging because we really want to understand. Okay, so remember that relative to active listening. And also, active listening allows a space for the individual to be heard. A lot of times, people just want to be heard, and they want space for their voice to feel like their voice is resonating, and they want to be heard, and often they want to be heard without a whole lot of interruption. Active listening, if you're doing it correctly, you're not interrupting a whole lot. You're just allowing the person to talk, so that they get that opportunity to be heard. And sometimes they just want to vent. And I know that sometimes with people and and wanting to be heard and venting, sometimes people will go on and on and on and on. And, so I do understand that. And the one thing that I used to do, and I still do it from time to time when it's necessary, uh, what I do when there's a conflict situation and someone is, someone comes in and they're just kind of, I can see it or feel it, and I will literally either close the door to the office, or take them to a conference room, or find some safe space, and I will tell them, I'll say, okay, it looks like there's some problem, some situation, some conflict that's going on. Um, we're alone. I promise you, it's not going to leave this room. I will give you 2 minutes to just vent. And I'll just let them go. I'll listen to what they're saying. And I said, and I'll let them know, I'm not going to hold this against you. It will not leave this room, but I'll give you 2 minutes to vent. But then after that, we can talk about how we resolve this. So, and then again, I'll just let them go. So, and that tends to work pretty well, because again, a lot of times people just want the opportunity to be heard. Other times they just want to vent. They just need to let it out. And because conflict can contribute to a toxic environment, you want them to get it out in a safe space and not spew it around the entire office, environment, or organization. Okay. And so active listening also involves listening with empathy. And so you really are, again, listening with understanding, and acknowledging what is being said without judgment. So the goal is not to pass judgment or tell someone that they're right or wrong. It really is acknowledging this without judgment. And that might look like saying to them, sounds like you are really frustrated, or I can see you are really upset by this. These are things recognizing or relating to the individual, showing empathy and understanding, but not passing judgment. And also, it's important to ask open questions, especially when you're really trying to understand what's going on with the conflict. Asking those open-ended questions. How do you feel about that? Is everything okay? Asking open-ended questions so that they really do have an opportunity to share exactly what's occurring with regards to the conflict. And then showing that you're engaged and that you are really trying to understand, rephrasing in simple terms what they've expressed. So rephrasing is just repeating, but or saying something in a different way. So it might sound like, what I heard you say is, and then checking to make sure, is that correct? Okay, so that's active listening. Excuse me. So the third technique is around neutrality. Again, neutrality, or being a neutral, is a mediation technique. In mediation, we use what's called a neutral third party. That individual is considered a neutral, who assists the disputing parties in reaching a mutually agreeable outcome to the conflict. And this, being that neutral, making sure that you're always just outside of the conflict itself, but you're intervening only for understanding and to help the parties themselves work out a workable solution. That allows you to distance yourself from the conflict. Okay, so those are the three techniques: de-escalation, active listening, and being that neutral. These are some examples of neutral or open or neutral phrases. Okay, so can you tell me about the situation? Can you tell me what happened? What would you like to see change? So any of these are gives you an idea of how you might look at phrasing some of your questions when you're really starting to deal with conflict, address conflict, want to ask those open-ended questions or neutral questions that are going to get the parties really addressing the conflict. And you can, when addressing conflict, you can address it with one party, with each party by themselves, or sometimes in a conflict, when both parties are there and present, it's important to address it with both of the parties. But that's something that you kind of have to feel out in a particular conflict situation, whether the situation presents itself. If the parties are calmer, talking, are communicative, and there's a disagreement or a conflict, sometimes you can deal with them, both parties together. If it's a really heightened type of situation where it's kind of intense, then it might be better to suggest that the parties just take a couple of minutes, cool down, and then you either bring them back together or you meet individually with the individuals. If you are the one involved in the conflict yourself, then you have to kind of test the waters. If the situation is more intense and you're trying to de-escalate, it might be better to say, I think we both might benefit from just taking a breather, and let's agree to address this a little bit later. So whether you're involved in the conflict or it's a conflict that involves others. So I am, excuse me. So this is a neutral statements exercise. So for the 5 statements, I'm going to read these somewhat quickly and ask you to type in the chat whether the statement is suggestive, because if you're a neutral, you shouldn't be suggesting anything to the involved parties. So I'm going to ask you to identify whether the statement is a suggestion or if it involves a judgment, okay? And just type S or J in the chat. So the first question, or the first statement, excuse me, it sounds like you were not playing by the rules. Is that a statement or a judgment? Oops. Statement or judgment? Okay. I'm sorry, suggestion or judgment. Okay. And as you can, yes, so that sounds more like a judgment, saying that the individual was not playing by the rules. Okay, and why did you do that? That was a foolish thing to do. Is that a suggestion or a judgment? And yes, judgment, good. The best way for you to handle this is to ask your supervisor to move offices. Number 3, is that a suggestion or a judgment? Yes, good. Okay, I thought I'd catch some of you, but good. Suggestion. And then number 4, it seems that one of you is lying. Is that a suggestion or a judgment? Yes, very judgmental. And then finally, do you think that you could pay Myosha for the computer? Is that a suggestion or a judgment? Yes, and that's obviously a suggestion, since do you think? So yes, suggestion, good. Very good. I am not going to do the next part of this exercise, but I'm going to encourage you to do it on your own. And that is to rewrite these statements in a way that makes the statement neutral. Okay, so that's an exercise that I'm going to ask that you practice on your own, so that just in the interest of time. Okay, so just very quickly, I'm going to go over conflict management traps and tips. I'm going to reiterate again that it is very important that you not get sucked into the conflict. A lot of times that is really what happens. That's what contributes to a toxic environment, because, slowly different people start getting sucked into the conflict and no one ever deals with the actual conflict issue. Stay as neutral as possible. It is hard. It is not an easy thing to do. But staying neutral helps you to be able to intervene in a conflict in a positive way. Stay calm. Do not match the emotion or intensity of the conflict. The calmer you are, the less likely it is that the conflict situation will escalate. And try not to take anything that's said personally, because what individuals do, part of a coping mechanism and part of the way that people deal with conflict, is that they turn it out against others. And so really try not to take that personally. Manage your own tone and reactions. And when a conflict goes beyond your individual intervention and requires external assistance, meaning that the situation presents a dangerous or a danger to yourself or others. There's harassment involved, there's aggression, or the situation is overly aggressive, there's escalation or uncontrollable escalation, then it really is the time to keep in mind that sometimes a situation might get to the point where police intervention might be necessary, or utilization of an employee assistance program for counseling, or bringing in HR or legal as appropriate. And some organizations might actually have what's referred to as an ombudsman. And an ombudsman is a neutral, external third party where people can take conflicts so that it's not addressed in the workplace. So if you happen to have that available to you, but any of these options, if the situation goes beyond your individual control. So now what I would like us to do is another exercise, and this one we'll do together. Oops, we'll do this together, and that is looking at this video. And I want you to look at how this conflict is handled, and then to kind of discuss what could or should happen in order to help address the conflict, and also identify what worked and what didn't work. So it's going to show you a wrong way, and then it's going to show you a right way. And I am going to stop
Put it in the
sharing.
chat. I
Oh, you
put it in the chat, Karen.
Oh,
don't click the
perfect.
first one because that was wonky, but the second one should be correct.
Oh, the second in the chat. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
so everyone, we're having some technical issues, and I admit I am technically challenged. And so, thank you so much. Kelly has posted the video in the chat. So I'm going to ask everyone to take a couple of minutes now and take a look at that video. I think it's less than 2 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. And so take a look at that, and then we will resume the discussion. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, everyone should be finishing up with the video. Can someone
Just give a
confirm that
maybe they
you,
can give a thumbs up if you're done.
yeah, thumbs up if you're done? Thank you. Okay, good, good. Okay, great. So then let me see if I can get a couple of volunteers. I'm going to ask you to just unmute yourself if you have a comment about the video. Relative to our discussion about conflict management and talking about sources of workplace conflict um, and identifying conflict, so what do you think about the wrong way that was presented first in the video?
There is one comment in the chat where someone says,
Oh,
oops, I'm guilty of the what do you want from me,
oh.
quote unquote.
Yes, well, thank you for that, Jennifer. Yes, and I think a lot of us, whether we verbalize that or not, are often thinking that. And I think it's also important to recognize that in conflict situations, especially the type that's presented in that video, when you are the one on the on the receiving end of someone not doing what they're supposed to do, then you can understand how someone can really get agitated about that. But by the same token, if you're the one, okay, I came in a little bit late. All right, well, I didn't quite meet that deadline. No big deal. So you can be sometimes people are a bit more forgiving to themselves than they are to others. And so it's always also important to kind of consider the other person's perspective, to put yourself in the other person's shoes. I see other comments in the chat, and then I'm going to take a couple of the hands. Yes.
Yes.
So first, let me take the chat real quick. Putting a kinder tone to the conversation is definitely good, but I recommend that the on-time person should document. Lori, yes, that is both of your comments are very good. Yes, tone is important. Documentation is also important, especially when we talk about that kind of protracted, ongoing type of conflict. And Julie, the situation requires empathy and maybe further probing. Very good. Recognizing that empathy as well as really kind of questioning kind of what's going on. Absolutely. And I see Tangi Johnson, your hand is raised.
Yes, hello. I'm enjoying the presentation, so thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
But my comment about the video, I think timing too. When you pick the time to approach someone, I mean, she didn't have her coat on, but she barely had it off.
Exactly. Thank you.
Approached about the situation. Yep. I think timing, has a lot to do with it. It may not have been the appropriate time to actually address that.
And thank you very much for recognizing that. That's an excellent point. And there's an example that I have from my workplace, or from a place where I forgot what company now, where there was conflict and between a couple of my direct reports. And in addressing each of the individuals, what I found out was at the core of the conflict was that very issue, timing. And it was something as simple as the person would arrive at a particular time, and the other individual would immediately start bombarding them with, I need you to do this, and I need you to do that. And it was something as simple, the solution was something as simple as recognizing that when this person arrives, at least just start with saying good morning. Okay, something as simple as that was able to resolve a lot of the conflict. Understanding the importance of that moment of just being able to kind of, okay, good morning. Now, what do you need? So yes, timing. And let's see, I know we have several other comments in the chat. I don't know that it's effective to promise to not be late again. Yeah, and that's very good. Yeah, but trying harder and maybe doing what you can to take on some extra work off their plate. Right, trying to help them out if you can. I think the on-time person could have waited until the initial situation diffused a bit. Yes, very true. Yes, documenting. Yes, very good comments. Thank you for your comments on that video. So yes, so now I'm going to start sharing again because I want to, and I know we're getting short on time. I always want to pack so much into these workshops because, like I said, there's so much more to discuss on this topic. Okay, so
Sounds like a part 2 might be in order for the rest of this because it's all very important.
Oh, well,
I wouldn't want to really rush into it, but thank you. Yeah.
Well, good. Yeah. Then what I will do, yes, I think that is very good. And so, actually, thank you, Kelly, for that suggestion. I think that would work best in this situation because I also feel like we have covered quite a bit already, and so I am going to start kind of wrapping up. And so I'm going to, let's see, okay. So let's see. Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing for the moment. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping up because I am very cognizant of time and I am very respectful of your time. And I appreciate the fact that you all have made time to be here and engage in this workshop. So, so I will just touch on what I was, the other part of what I was going to get into, but as Kelly suggested, and I wholeheartedly agree, I don't want to rush through it. And that is around conflict styles. And the conversation around conflict styles is very important. It is important because conflict styles first helps you to understand your own conflict style, but it also to understand the conflict styles of others and how to best intervene when dealing with different conflict styles. So at this point, I'm just going to use that as a little bit of a teaser for the part 2 of this conflict management workshop. So, so I thank you all for your participation. But before we finish up, you know, and again, I feel like we covered a lot today. We talked about what conflict is, how to identify conflict, how to intervene in conflict. You learned 3 very important techniques associated with managing conflict or addressing conflict, and that's de-escalation, active listening, and being a neutral. And you've been able to kind of practice some with identifying whether a statement is an open statement or a suggestion or a judgment. And hopefully you will take away from this, you know, practicing some of those open statements and being neutral in a conflict situation. And before we finish up, I am going to share my slides again. And what I'm going to ask you to do is, oops. Sorry, I thought I zoomed past. Yes, there was a lot more. But I am going to ask you to take a few minutes now, since now we're going to finish up just a few minutes early, if you wouldn't mind completing the survey. And let me see if actually I am going to stop sharing so that I can put the survey link in the chat. Okay. I would greatly appreciate you providing your feedback. Okay, oops. Sorry, that was sent to Kelly. I'm going to send it to everyone now. Okay, so you all should be able to see the survey link. So I would greatly appreciate it if you would complete that. And you have a couple of minutes now to complete the survey. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so as we prepare to wrap up this part one of the workshop, does anyone have any questions that I can answer for you with regards to conflict or anything in general? Do you have, okay, there's a question. Do you have suggestions for mediation organizations to reach out to in place of an in-house HR department? There are different organizations that do mediation. There are volunteer mediation organizations. They usually have a specific purpose or a goal. So maybe they only handle community organizational conflict, or so some of them have specific purposes. And then there's also mediation organizations like I think they're called JAG, but they handle more mediation that's more in the legal mediation realm. So there are different organizations. I can't specifically name any, only because I know that people are on this call from all over. And so you really have to look at your local mediation sources. But if you Google mediation services, then you will come up with some organizations. Mediation, dispute resolution, conflict management, any of those terms might be used. And then finally, I also do mediation with organizations, between individuals. So you're certainly free to reach out to me as well at missiontotransition.com. And I do it in person.
And that's the number 2, right?
Yes,
and that's the number two.
Mission,
right.
the number 2 transition.com. Yes, and I do it in person as well as virtually. Okay, any other questions? Okay.
And we'll make sure that we let all of you know about part 2 when we get that scheduled, so we can continue the journey, because I did see some comments about folks filling out the questionnaire and are eager to sort of address some of those things as well.
Yes, and I look forward to working with all of you again in part 2. So thank you all for participating. I really do appreciate it.
We have one more question in the chat from Jennifer. What's the best course when one party is reluctant to resolve the conflict?
Yeah, that's really good. Okay. When someone is reluctant to address the conflict, typically it's saying a lot of times the individual could be feeling, they don't want to put themselves in an aggressive type of situation. They may have a more avoiding type of conflict style, and that is what we'll get into in part 2. So in that type of situation, it's often best to address that individual one-on-one and really allow them the opportunity to, using some of those active listening skills, allow them the opportunity to vent, use their voice, express what it is that they're feeling, experiencing, and then setting out a clear, well, talking with the individual to make sure that they're comfortable with the approach that you want to take to the conflict. Letting them know, if you're comfortable talking with the individual, we can come together and I will be there to mediate. I will be there to facilitate. Just building that, helping them to recognize that you will establish a safe space for addressing the conflict. A lot of times that's going to help give the person the reassurance that they need to go ahead and deal with the conflict. So hopefully that helped, Kathy. Okay, did I miss any other questions?
No, I think those are the only two questions that I saw. We do have a few people want to talk about power imbalances and how do you address those things?
Yes.
But perhaps that's part two.
That is
we'll add it to the list for part two.
Definitely part two.
Yes. Well, thank you, Karen, so much. There's nothing like when having conflict and feeling helpless about how to proceed, even if we weren't able to get through all of it. We were through enough of it to at least we can be responsible for our own behavior a little bit more, and we can identify some strategies that maybe subconsciously we hadn't thought about using, and now that we can consciously think about using. So thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you, all of you, for including us in your day and finding what we have to offer here at Mid-America Arts Alliance valuable enough to make it part of your work week and your professional development. And we will be sure to reach out to all of you soon with a date for part two. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.